Поначалу органы безопасности предполагали,
At first, the KGB thought that the debris
американскому разведывательному самолету или
came from an American spying plane or a Soviet spaceship.
George Filer, a retired Air Force intelligence officer who was stationed at Langley, is not surprised the Russians were so interested in this object.
We found that the Soviets would pay to get information on UFOs as opposed to, we'll say, an F-111 aircraft, that they were, in a way, more interested in UFOs than some of our latest aircraft.
And here you see the man who is probably the head KGB agent directing the cameraman to point his camera toward the disc. A total of almost 1,200 feet of negative were recovered just on this crash site. It is possible that more film was shot, but this is all that we were able to obtain. None of this film depicts the removal of the disc itself, and at no point do we see inside the object. From this angle, we do see the handheld camera shooting behind or inside the disc. However, that footage, if it was, in fact, ever shot, was not included in the cans of film we acquired. We can only speculate that it may still be at large. We must also speculate on how the object ended up here. Based on information from Vereshchagin's book and what we can see in this footage, we have created this computer-animated version of how researchers believe the crash may have occurred. The questions then become, where did this object come from and how did it come to crash here? And more importantly, what has happened to it since?
That this happened because I remember in 1991, 1992, there has been a lot of talk about the KGB files. It's quite possible that the files, some of the files, had been sold to the highest bidder.
What is now modern-day Russia was once the core republic of the Soviet Union. Prior to its breakup in 1992, the USSR was the world's largest country, stretching from Eastern Europe into Asia. In addition, the USSR had direct control over the Eastern European countries of Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and East Germany. The boundary of these countries was for years referred to as the Iron Curtain. For decades, its military power influenced events throughout the globe. The single most important event in Russian history was the Revolution of 1917. The Bolsheviks changed the country from a monarchy to the world's first communist state. In the late 1920s, Joseph Stalin transformed the country even more by regimenting every aspect of daily life and still managed to brutally stomp out his opposition. While the USSR was allied with the West during World War II, the years after the war ushered in an era of mistrust that came to be known as the Cold War. This new relationship chilled ever further in August of 1949, when the Soviets exploded their first atomic weapon. The Western powers, including the United States, viewed the USSR as the world's greatest threat. In its ongoing competition with the West, Russia's greatest victory occurred in 1957 under the leadership of Nikita Khrushchev. It was the beginning of the space age. As the first nation into space, it's not surprising that in the years to follow, the Soviets would become increasingly curious about extraterrestrial life existing in our galaxy. Despite their early victory in the space race, back at home, the standard of living and the country's lagging economy weighed heavy on the minds of the Soviet citizens. Under Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev in the 1980s, the terms glasnost and perestroika came to represent a period of humanist reform. The first truly democratic elections in Russia's history occurred in 1991. After 70 years of Soviet rule, the USSR was dissolved. A new market economy has emerged along with more freedom for the people. While there are some who yearn for a return to communism, most citizens feel that the new Russian democracy has been a vast improvement to their daily lives. But with these positive changes come problems. In a recent news survey in Russia, citizens were asked the question, who controls Russia today? An astounding 23% responded the mafia. Renowned Russian writer and Nobel laureate Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote, "Russia's economic chaos is the result of merely criminal reforms that have created a new class of mafia capitalists." The word mafia refers to the new system of organized crime in Russia, involving countless government officials, businessmen, and organizations controlled by criminal groups. Resistance to extortion attempts has resulted in violence. Kidnappings, assassinations, attacks on family members, or harsh persecution by corrupt government officials have been documented. Dozens of bankers were kidnapped and assassinated by the mafia in the first few years of Russia's independence, when organized crime was taking control over the country's financial system. Having eliminated its rivals in such a brutal manner, the Russian mafia is now in a position of great power. What the future holds for the Russian Republic is uncertain. What is certain is that in the next Russian elections in the year 2000, the interests of big business and those with money will be well represented, and undoubtedly so will organized crime. Mafiocracy, as it has been called, might become the totalitarianism of the new millennium.
With the collapse of the Soviet Union, many changes have come to Moscow and the rest of Russia. Gone is communism and the strict controls that once governed daily life here.
Please understand, Russia has always been a secret society. Just recently, we found out that the secret police had kept records on UFO phenomena, and some of them had been released only recently. Some, not all, coming to light now.
Case in point, the intriguing film footage we had acquired. Proof, some say, of alien visitation. Being that this material is of such sensational nature, we had many questions regarding its history. Little information was provided us by the black market dealer from whom the film was purchased. It is likely that such materials were kept stored in a holding facility, a vault located beneath KGB headquarters perhaps, reserved only for those with the highest level of security clearance. Kept safe in underground storage for decades, the film was probably only handled by a select few who would have known of its existence. After the collapse of the Soviet system, there was a transitional period marked by confusion. Accountability to the old regime dwindled, and closely guarded property lay vulnerable to the changes sweeping through the crumbling Union. Those with connections under the old regime found themselves perfectly positioned to exploit the situation.
There was a lot of chaos when the Soviet Union, disintegrated. In my opinion, at that time, it was very easy for an, agent with brains to get his hands on such files and sell them here.
So it would be conceivable that documentation might be obtainable through similar sources to provide authentication of the film. Though most leads proved to be ultimately unproductive, we found that with perseverance, money, and a bit of luck, it is possible to acquire classified Soviet documents. Using a hidden camera, we recorded numerous meetings over a period of months in which we attempted to obtain relevant materials. This transaction between one of our Moscow contacts, an interpreter, and a local black market dealer proved to be one of the more successful ventures. The location of this meeting is a textile factory in the Sokolniki district of Moscow. This office is that of the Russian entrepreneur who owns the plant and is used for both legitimate and illegal business. After introductions and some initial small talk, the American buyer asks the interpreter if the documents are on the premises.
Are the documents here from the actual that you have?
Вон Бакер спрашивает, документы у вас с собой? Юра, ты мне задал сложную задачу. Достать такого рода документы было очень просто.
Я понимаю, именно поэтому мы обратились к вам, потому что Федор очень рекомендовал вас там улучшить.
Конечно, я знаю нужных людей, знаю, как достать такие документы, но это было совсем небезопасно.
What's this out here? Hold on. Мы ценим это очень, и именно поэтому мы обратились к вам. Хорошо, работаем.
Цена оказалась больше
The
первого.
businessman tells him that he has had difficulty in obtaining the documents and the price has gone up. He is told that it is impossible to come up with any additional money.
Да, мы договаривались, ты должен понять, что достать такого рода документацию это совсем небезопасно.
Не, я понимаю. We only have 10,000. Да, у нас только 10 тысяч, понимаете, в этой сумке сейчас 10 тысяч. Но мы договаривались с вами первоначально.
Да, мы договаривались, но...
I mean, I can't go out and...
Это очень сложно, кстати. Я должен это понимать.
Я понимаю, я, Юрий Алексеевич, я отлично понимаю, но вы понимаете, здесь вот в данный момент находится только 10 тысяч. Мы не можем сейчас найти где-то еще вдруг никто не сегодня 5 тысяч.
After consultation with his associate, the seller finally agrees to honor the original price.
Давай, бабки, ладно.
The files are then removed from a safe and given to the interpreter to inspect.
This is KGB? Yes, this is some report about accident in Sverdlov. Does this look... Do you think this is...
Он просто хочет убедиться, что документы подлинные. Конечно, official KGB.
After inspection of the documents and a cursory verification of their authenticity, the transaction is completed.
Okay, well, we should pay Mr. Chevalier and...
Money changes hands, and what was once property of the state now becomes much sought-after evidence for UFO researchers. What made this transaction so successful was that among the pile of documents acquired, several were extremely enlightening, including a top-secret KGB report on Operation Sverdlovsk Midget and a request for military assistance from the Soviet Ministry of Defense.
While the ability of Western governments to keep secrets is hotly debated, one thing seems certain. Behind the Iron Curtain, secrecy was standard operating procedure. Here, under the Soviets, freedom of the press and government accountability to the public were virtually non-existent.
Many believe that the American government has had more than a casual interest in the possibility of extraterrestrial presence since early in the 20th century. Certainly since reports of flying discs in Roswell, New Mexico in the late 1940s, U.S. Defense Department and intelligence community involvement in the investigation of UFOs has been documented. Aside from the former Project Blue Book and 2 recent Air Force reports attempting to close the case on Roswell, there has been little made public by the government regarding its interest in UFOs. One organization that apparently did study UFOs was the Central Intelligence Agency. Since the Cold War era, it has been alleged that the CIA has actively sought after, on a priority level, the acquisition of any Soviet information that relates to alien contact and technology. One person who confirmed such allegations is this man. An agent with the CIA for 6 years, his area of expertise was Russian interest in anomalous activity. Though now employed in the private sector as a security analyst, he has asked not to be identified due to the sensitive nature of both his former status and his current position.
I joined the CIA in 1989, straight out of college. My mission was to monitor and infiltrate the Special Sciences Section of the KGB, a unit of Directorate T, which was a division of the First Chief Directorate. Special Sciences Section's goal was to obtain, analyze, interpret, and exploit any extraterrestrial knowledge. The Special Sciences Section was extremely interested in a number of reported UFO crashes over the former Soviet Union